The steel doors locked behind her. 50 armed men turned their heads, their hands instinctively dropping to their holsters. She was just a trauma nurse, clutching a clipboard. But when she slammed her silver pen onto the bloody metal tray, the entire Chicago underworld held its breath. This is her story. Amelia Hayes was 28 years old, chronically sleep-deprived, and drowning in her late father's gambling debts. As a senior trauma nurse at Chicago's Mercy General, she was used to the sight of blood, the sound of monitors flatlining, and the chaotic ballet of trying to keep shattered people alive. But hospital wages didn't make a dent in the kind of debt that came with threatening phone calls at 3:00 a.m. That was why Amelia moonlighted for Apex Med Tech, a discreet, high-end private nursing agency that paid in crisp, untraceable $100 bills. They didn't ask questions, and neither did she. If a wealthy socialite needed a discreet detox, or an offshore billionaire needed a private IV drip in his penthouse, Amelia went. But this Tuesday night was different. The text message arrived at 11:42 p.m. Code red. Wacker Drive. The Apex Logistics Building. Penthouse. $10,000. Cash. Do not wear scrubs. Dress black. $10,000 for a single shift. It was enough to pay off the most aggressive loan sharks breathing down her neck. Amelia threw on a black turtleneck and dark slacks, grabbed her medical bag, and stepped out into the freezing Chicago rain. A sleek, black Lincoln Navigator was already idling at the curb. The driver, a mountain of a man with a broken nose and a tailored Italian suit, opened the door without a word. The drive was conducted in absolute, suffocating silence. Amelia gripped the handle of her medical bag, her knuckles turning white. She knew the Apex Logistics Building. Everyone in the city knew it. It was the corporate front for the Costa Syndicate, the most ruthless organized crime family in the Midwest. When they arrived, Amelia was ushered through a private underground parking garage, past security checkpoints that rivaled a military base, and into a private freight elevator. The numbers on the display ticked upward to the 54th floor. The elevator doors slid open, revealing a scene of controlled chaos. The entire floor had been converted into a state-of-the-art, clandestine trauma center. The floors were imported black marble, but tonight they were smeared with bright, wet crimson. Men in ruined designer suits were shouting into burner phones. The air smelled metallic, a sickening blend of fresh copper, expensive leather, and antiseptic. "In here," the giant driver grunted, shoving Amelia toward a set of frosted glass double doors. Amelia pushed through. Inside the makeshift operating theater, the tension was thick enough to choke on. At the center of the room lay a young man, barely early 20s, completely pale. His white dress shirt was soaked in blood, from a devastating gunshot wound to the right abdomen. Surrounding the table were 3 armed guards, their faces taut with panic, but the gravity of the room was entirely commanded by one man standing at the head of the table, Damien Costa. Amelia had seen his face in the society pages, always photographed at charity galas with a charming, predatory smile. In person, there was no charm, only cold, lethal authority. He wore a bespoke charcoal suit, his tie stripped off, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with tension and ink. His dark eyes were fixed on the dying boy on the table, his younger brother, Leo Costa. "Heart rate is dropping, boss," muttered a balding man in a white coat. This was Dr. Samuel Aris, a disgraced former surgeon who now patched up mobsters for a premium. I was sweating profusely, his hands trembling as he fumbled with an IV line. "Then fix it, Samuel." Damien's voice was dangerously quiet. It didn't boom, it sliced. "If my brother dies on this table, you don't walk out of this building. I need to intubate and push a broad-spectrum antibiotic and an anesthetic before I dig for the bullet," Dr. Aris stammered, grabbing a pre-filled syringe from the sterile tray. "Nurse, get over here. Chart his vitals, now." Amelia snapped into her professional headspace. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford when a patient was bleeding out. She stepped up to the monitors, her eyes scanning the readouts. Blood pressure was tanking. 80/50. Tachycardia. She picked up the digital tablet resting on the edge of the surgical tray. It contained Leo's sparse medical history. Her eyes darted across the digital lines, cross-referencing the information with the vials. Dr. Aris was lining up on the metal tray. Aris picked up a massive syringe filled with a milky white substance and a secondary syringe of clear fluid. Pushing ceftriaxone for infection prophylaxis and succinylcholine to paralyze the muscles, Aris announced, his voice shaking as he moved toward the IV port in Leo's arm. Amelia's eyes locked onto the bottom of the digital chart. Her breath hitched. Patient history. Severe, lethal anaphylaxis to cephalosporin class antibiotics. Pseudocholinesterase deficiency. If Aris pushed those drugs, Leo Costa's throat would swell shut in seconds, his muscles would break down, and his heart would stop. It wouldn't look like a medical error to an untrained eye. It would just look like the gunshot wound had claimed him. Amelia looked up. Dr. Aris wasn't just nervous. His eyes were darting frantically to the door. He was holding the syringe with a white-knuckled grip, rushing the process, completely bypassing standard verification protocols. He knew. "I was doing this on purpose." "Doctor," Amelia said, her voice clear but strained. "Wait." "Shut up and bag him," Aris snapped, uncapping the needle. "I said wait," Amelia repeated, louder this time. "I don't have time for a temp nurse's hesitation," Aris yelled, moving the needle within an inch of the rubber IV port. Amelia had a split second to make a choice. Keep her mouth shut, take her $10,000, and watch a 22-year-old boy get murdered on an operating table, or intervene and put a target on her own back. Amelia didn't just speak. She acted. She raised her hand and slammed her heavy silver medical pen down onto the stainless steel surgical tray. Clack! The sound echoed through the cavernous penthouse like a gunshot. Everyone stopped. The chaos in the room instantly evaporated into a dead, terrifying silence. The three-armed guts immediately drew their weapons, the hollow shh clack of safeties being switched off ringing in the air. 3 laser sights painted red dots on Amelia's chest and forehead. Dr. Aris froze, the needle hovering millimeters from the IV line. Damien Costa slowly turned his head, his dark eyes locked onto Amelia. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He didn't yell. He didn't draw a weapon. He just stared at her with a look of pure, unadulterated calculation. "Who the hell are you?" Damien asked, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in Amelia's chest. "Amelia Hayes. I'm the trauma nurse you hired," she said. Her heart was hammering against hers like a trapped bird, but she forced her hands to remain completely still. She looked Damien dead in the eye, refusing to look at the red laser dots on her shirt. "And if you let him push that syringe, Your brother will be dead in 45 seconds. Dr. Aris's face drained of color. Boss, she's insane. She's just a temp. Leo is crashing. I need to push these meds now, or we lose him to shock. Damien didn't look at Aris. His eyes remained fixed on Amelia. Explain. Now. You have 10 seconds. Look at the chart, Amelia commanded, her voice steadying as her medical training took over. She pointed the tablet toward Damien. Your brother has a documented pseudocholinesterase deficiency and a severe allergy to cephalosporins. Dr. Aris is holding ceftriaxone and succinylcholine. Together, they will cause immediate, irreversible, anaphylactic shock and respiratory paralysis. His heart will stop, and you will think it was from the blood loss. It won't be. It will be an execution. The silence that followed was deafening. Damien's gaze slowly shifted from Amelia to Dr. Aris. Aris was trembling violently now. Sweat dripped from his chin. Boss, it's a mistake in the chart. I know what I'm doing. I've been your doctor for 5 years. Are you going to listen to some street-level nurse over me? Aris, Damien said softly. Look at me. The doctor swallowed hard, looking up. Did you check his chart? Damien asked. We were in a hurry, boss. He was bleeding out. Did you check it? Damien's voice rose slightly, a crack of thunder in the quiet room. Amelia watched as the puzzle pieces clicked together in Damien's mind. The Costa Syndicate was currently in a brutal turf war with the Russo family. A hit had been put out on Leo tonight. It had failed, but Leo was badly wounded. Who better to finish the job than a compromised doctor inside the Costa's own secure fortress? He didn't just fail to check it, Amelia interjected boldly, surprising even herself. These specific drugs aren't standard first line for trauma unless you're intentionally bypassing safer alternatives. He bypassed 3 other safe anesthetics in that cabinet to choose the one that would kill your brother. Damien's jaw clenched. The muscles in his neck jumped. Take him, Damien whispered. The 3 guards instantly lowered their weapons from Amelia and converged on Dr. Aris. The doctor screamed, dropping the syringe as 2 massive men grabbed him by the arms, dragging him backward away from the operating table. Boss, no! The Russos threatened my family. They said they'd kill my wife, Aris sobbed, his heels dragging across the bloody marble floor. I had no choice. Damien, please. Take him to the basement, Damien ordered, his back already turned to the traitor. The heavy, frosted glass doors swung shut, muffling the doctor's frantic screams. Damien stepped up to the opposite side of the surgical table. He looked down at his brother, whose breathing was becoming shallow and ragged. The monitor beeped frantically. He then looked up at Amelia. The lasers were gone. The hostility in his eyes was replaced by a desperate, burning intensity. Can you save him? Damien asked. Amelia looked at the surgical tray, then at the gaping wound in Leo's side. She wasn't a surgeon. She was an ER nurse. But she had assisted in 100 trauma surgeries, and she knew the anatomy of a gunshot wound better than most residents. I need an extra pair of hands, Amelia said, ripping open a sterile gown and throwing it over her clothes. She shoved a pair of latex gloves toward the most dangerous man in Chicago. Scrub in. You're going to hold the retractors. Damien Costa didn't blink. He took the gloves. Tell me what to do, he said. For the next 2 hours, the penthouse turned into a desperate battlefield. Amelia took total command. She shouted orders at the remaining mobsters, forcing them to fetch blood bags, apply pressure, and monitor the vitals while she meticulously cleaned the wound, located the severed artery, and clamped it off. Damien stood right beside her, his hands covered in his brother's blood, following her every command with terrifying precision. He didn't flinch. He didn't question her. Whenever Amelia demanded a tool, he had it ready. As they worked, a strange electric synergy formed between them over the bloody operating table. Amelia was in her element, fierce and uncompromising. Damien watched her, his sharp eyes taking in the way she commanded the room, unbothered by the fact that she was surrounded by murderers and criminals. She was entirely focused on the life under her hands. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the monitors settled into a steady, rhythmic beep. The bleeding was stopped. The bullet was sitting in a metal kidney dish. Amelia stepped back, peeling off her blood-soaked gloves. She leaned against the stainless steel counter, her chest heaving, the adrenaline finally beginning to crash. "He's stable," Amelia breathed out, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her arm. "He needs a real ICU, but he'll make it through the night." Damien stood at the head of the table, staring at his brother's rising and falling chest. He slowly stripped off his own gloves, throwing them into the biohazard bin. He picked up a damp towel and wiped his hands, then turned his full attention back to Amelia. The silence returned, but this time, it wasn't filled with the threat of violence. It was heavy with something else. Something Amelia couldn't quite define. Damien walked slowly around the table, stopping just a few feet in front of her. Up close, he was even more intimidating. He smelled of cordite, blood, and expensive cedar. He reached into the inner pocket of his ruined suit jacket, pulled out a thick envelope, and tossed it onto the counter next to her. "50,000, Damien said quietly. "For tonight." Amelia looked at the envelope, then up at him. The agency agreed on 10. "The agency is done with you," Damien stated, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You don't work for them anymore. You don't work for Mercy General anymore." Amelia frowned, a spike of panic hitting her chest. "Excuse me. You can't just—" "Your father," Damien interrupted smoothly, stepping half a pace closer. "Robert Hayes. He owes the Falcone crew 120 grand. They were planning to collect your kneecaps by Friday." Amelia froze. Her blood ran cold. How did he know that? "As of 5 minutes ago," Damien continued, his dark eyes trailing down to her trembling hands and back up to her face. "That debt has been bought by me. It's wiped clean." Amelia swallowed hard. "Why would you do that?" Damien leaned in slightly, his presence overwhelming her senses. "Because, Amelia," he murmured, his voice a dangerous velvet purr, "you just saved my brother's life. And in this city, the Costa family protects its own." He paused, his gaze dropping to the silver pen, still resting on the surgical tray. "You work for me now." Amelia Hayes did not go back to her cramped apartment that night. By dawn, a team of men in tailored suits had packed up her meager belongings and moved her into the penthouse suites at the St. Regis, Chicago. When she finally woke up after a 14-hour crash, she found a heavy platinum keycard on her nightstand and a closet filled with designer clothes in her exact size. She was no longer a civilian. She was the exclusive private physician for the Costa Syndicate. The transition was jarring. One day, she was fighting with insurance providers at Northwestern Memorial Hospital over basic patient care. The next, she was stitching up knife wounds in the back of a moving Mercedes Maybach S-Class, paid in bricks of unmarked cash. She treated men with names like Razor, and the priest, men who wouldn't hesitate to break a kneecap, but who treated Amelia with absolute, terrifying reverence. They called her the Angel of Wacker Drive, but the real shift was her proximity to Damien Costa. Damien was a phantom of violence and high society grace. He wore a $250,000 Patek Philippe Grand Complications watch and commanded an empire of underground casinos, shipping ports, and political leverage. Yet, he made it a point to check on Amelia every single day. It started with small things. A fresh cup of artisanal espresso waiting on her desk in the Apex Logistics medical bay. A quiet, lingering look when she briefed him on his men's recoveries. Then it escalated. If Amelia needed specialized medical equipment, it appeared within hours. When she casually mentioned missing the blueberry scones from a specific bakery in the West Loop, the bakery was bought out the next morning, its entire inventory delivered to her door. The tension between them was a living, breathing thing. It crackled in the air whenever they were in the same room. Amelia told herself it was just adrenaline, the survival instinct of a woman trapped in a gilded cage. But every time Damien's dark eyes locked onto hers, every time his large, calloused hand brushed against hers when passing a chart, her pulse hammered a frantic rhythm that had nothing to do with fear. 4 weeks into her new life, reality came crashing back in. Amelia was leaving a high-end boutique pharmacy on the Magnificent Mile, picking up specialized burn cream for one of the enforcers, when a heavy hand clamped down on her shoulder. She spun around, her hand instinctively dropping to the panic button on her phone, a direct line to Damien's security team. "I wouldn't do that, Miss Hayes," a raspy voice warned. It was a man in a wrinkled trench coat, flashing a gold badge. "Detective Sullivan, Chicago Police Department, Organized Crime Division." "Get in the car," Sullivan muttered, nodding toward an unmarked Ford Taurus parked illegally in the loading zone. Amelia stood her ground, the cold Chicago wind whipping her hair across her face. "I don't have anything to say to you, Detective. Am I under arrest?" Sullivan sneered, leaning in close. He smelled of stale tobacco and cheap whiskey. "Not yet. But you will be. We know you're playing Florence Nightingale for Damien Costa. We know about the penthouse, the wire transfers. We also know the Russo family is planning to wipe the board clean tonight at the Costa Charity Gala at the Drake Hotel. They're bringing heavy artillery, Amelia. Costa is a dead man walking." Amelia's blood ran cold. The charity gala. Damien, Leo, and the entire upper echelon of the syndicate were going to be in one ballroom tonight. "Why are you telling me this?" Amelia demanded, masking her panic. "Because I want Costa, but the Russos are animals. I'm offering you a way out," Sullivan lied smoothly. "Leave the city right now. I have a car waiting to take you to O'Hare. You get on a plane, and you don't look back. If you stay, you go down in the crossfire, or you go down as an accessory to organized crime. Your choice." Amelia looked at the detective. Her medical training kicked in, analyzing his micro-expressions. The sweating brow, the dilated pupils, the nervous twitch in his jaw. Sullivan wasn't trying to save her. He was on the Russo payroll. He was trying to remove Damien's only trauma specialist from the board before the hit. Amelia stepped back, her expression hardening into a mask of pure ice. "I think you have me confused with someone who runs, Detective," Amelia said softly. Before Sullivan could grab her, a sleek black SUV aggressively hopped the curb, tires screeching against the pavement. The doors flew open, and two of Damien's massive enforcers stepped out, their hands resting menacingly inside their jackets. Sullivan backed away, his face pale, cursing under his breath as he hurried to his unmarked car. Amelia didn't wait. She dove into the back of the SUV. "Get me to the Drake, right now! Step on it!" The Gold Coast room at the Drake Hotel was a masterpiece of crystal chandeliers and velvet drapery. It was filled with Chicago's elite, politicians, judges, and billionaires, all blissfully unaware that they were sipping vintage Dom Perignon courtesy of the city's most lethal crime boss. Damien Costa stood at the center of the room, looking like a dark god in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo. Leo, fully recovered from his gunshot wound, stood by his side, laughing with a city alderman. When Amelia burst through the gilded double doors, the security detail immediately parted for her. She was breathless, her coat thrown hastily over her scrubs. Damien's eyes found hers instantly across the crowded room. He excused himself, cutting through the sea of socialites with predatory grace. When he reached her, his hands immediately went to her shoulders, his thumbs mapping the tension in her muscles. "What's wrong?" "You're shaking," Damien demanded, his voice low, his eyes scanning her for injury. "The Russos," Amelia gasped, grabbing the lapels of his tuxedo. "They're hitting the gala. Tonight. Sullivan from the CPD is on their payroll. He tried to intercept me to keep me away. You have to get everyone out." Damien didn't ask questions. He didn't doubt her for a fraction of a second. His jaw locked, his eyes darkening to pitch black. He raised his hand, signaling his head of security, but it was too late. The heavy glass windows overlooking Walton Place shattered inward with a deafening crash. Automatic gunfire tore through the ballroom. Screams erupted as the chandeliers exploded in a shower of sparks and crystal. Chaos reigned. The socialites dove under tables, but Damien's men were already moving, drawing concealed weapons and returning fire with brutal efficiency. "Down!" Damien roared, wrapping his arms around Amelia and tackling her behind a massive overturned mahogany banquet table. Bullets chewed through the wood above their heads, raining splinters down on them. Damien drew a heavy matte black sidearm from his shoulder holster. He popped up, fired 3 precise shots, and ducked back down as return fire tore a velvet chair to shreds. "Are you hit?" Damien yelled over the deafening roar of gunfire, his hands frantically checking her arms and torso. I'm fine," Amelia shouted back, pulling her medical kit from her shoulder. "Leo?" "Security got him out through the kitchen," Damien grunted, reloading his weapon. He looked at her. His expression a terrifying mix of fury and raw, unfiltered fear, not for himself, but for her. "I told you I'd protect you, Amelia. I didn't bring you into my life to let you die in a hotel ballroom." Before Amelia could answer, a Russo hitman flanked their position, vaulting over a fallen ice sculpture. Damien reacted with lightning speed, throwing his body over Amelia's as he fired. The hitman dropped, but a stray bullet grazed Damien's shoulder, tearing through his tuxedo jacket and sending a spray of blood into the air. Damien cursed, clutching his left arm, the weapon nearly slipping from his grip. "Let me see it," Amelia ordered, the nurse in her instantly overriding her terror. "It's a graze, leave it," Damien barked, trying to push her away to return fire. "I said let me see it," she screamed, forcefully grabbing his shoulder. She ripped a combat dressing from her bag and slapped it hard against the bleeding groove in his deltoid, applying brutal, necessary pressure. Damien hissed in pain, his eyes locking onto hers. They were mere inches apart, huddled behind the shattered table in the middle of a war zone. The air smelled of gunpowder, copper, and expensive cologne. Amelia's hands were covered in his blood. Again. But this time, she wasn't a scared civilian trying to pay off a debt. She was a woman fighting for the man she had inadvertently fallen for. "You're not dying tonight, Damien," Amelia whispered fiercely, her eyes blazing with a fire that matched his own. "Do you hear me? You don't get to die on me." Damien stared at her, chest heaving. The gunshots around them seemed to muffle, fading into white noise. He reached up with his good arm, his blood-stained fingers cupping the back of her neck, tangling in her hair. "I belong to you, Amelia," Damien growled, his voice vibrating with a primal, possessive intensity. "Since the second you dropped that pen on the tray, you owned me." He pulled her in and crashed his lips against hers. It was a desperate, violent kiss, tasting of adrenaline, fear, and absolute certainty. Amelia kissed him back with equal ferocity, her hands gripping his bloodied shirt, anchoring him to her in the chaos. When they finally broke apart, Damien's eyes were completely changed. The fear was gone. Only the ruthless king of the Chicago underworld remained. "Stay here," he ordered softly, kissing her forehead. Damien stood up from behind the barricade. The ensuing 5 minutes were a masterclass in calculated violence. With his men rallying behind him, Damien ruthlessly pushed the Russo hitmen back, neutralizing the threat with cold, mechanical precision. By the time the police sirens wailed in the distance, the ballroom was secure, and the Russo family's most lethal crew was decimated. Amelia stood up slowly, her scrubs ruined, her heart pounding. Damien walked back through the wreckage toward her. He was bleeding, his tuxedo was destroyed, and he was surrounded by the bodies of his enemies. But as he looked at Amelia, he didn't look like a monster. He looked like a man who had finally found something worth fighting for. He stopped in front of her, ignoring his bleeding shoulder, and gently took her face in his hands. "The debt was paid weeks ago," Damien said quietly, his thumb brushing a streak of soot from her cheek. "You're free to go, Amelia. If you walk out those doors right now, you'll have $10 million in an offshore account, and I swear on my life, no one will ever bother you again." Amelia looked up into the eyes of the most dangerous man she had ever met. She thought about her old life, the crippling debt, the lonely shifts at the hospital, the hollow, empty existence of merely surviving. She reached up and covered his hands with hers. "I'm not going anywhere, Damien," she whispered, a slow, confident smile spreading across her lips. "Someone has to keep you alive." Damien's chest rose in a deep, shuddering breath. A fierce, triumphant smile broke through his stoic mask. He pulled her into his chest, holding her tight against his heart, right there in the ruins of the ballroom. Amelia Hayes had walked into the Costa building as a terrified nurse holding a silver pen. But as she stood victorious amidst the shattered glass of the Chicago elite, wrapped in the arms of the syndicate's ruthless king, she knew the truth. She wasn't just his doctor anymore. She was his queen. Wow, what an incredible journey with Amelia and Damien. If you loved this thrilling conclusion to our Mafia romance story, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more heart-pounding, real-life inspired dramas. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload. We want to hear from you. What was your favorite twist in the Costa Syndicate saga? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and share this video with your friends.